Good everyone. I hope you guys have an amazing day. So what I'll do today, I will walk you guys through some of the setup you might need to do when you're using before you actually start using PSS, right? Now, in my case, I've registered for an org, which is a full-fledged org, contains all the PSS data for me to test and to see the functionality, right? In your case, it may not be the case. So what we will do, right? I'll go through different step one by one to make it more clear for you, so that to ensure that all of these prerequisite steps are in place. Yeah, and as usual, right? I'll be teaching you guys from Trailhead. It's a great place to learn stuff. Um, and I'm not a fan of copy pasting trailhead content to a slide and then talking from there, right? Might as well use the trailhead, right? Okay, preparing the org, the first thing, right? Let's look at it. So obviously you need to verify your license. So I'm pretty sure you guys know how to do that. So if you are, in my case, I have, like I said, I've signed up for a free, not a free in general. It's a 30 days trial of full PSS org. Yeah, so in your case, it may be different, but the good way to test it, you just go to setup and obviously you can go to, company, uh, company information, and you can see all the info about the licenses here, right? So, which is pretty good. So you can come here, as you can see that you I have different licenses here. Sorry, the permission set, yeah, the permissions are license here, and I can also look at 10 more. Care plan, the benefit uh, management for partners, and I can also look at more. You can see that I have different licenses here, right? So this is the way you can have a look to see what kind of licenses you need to make sure you have PSS in place. So, for instance, licensing for permitting and management. So, this is important if you're an agency who relies heavily on licensing side of things, right? Okay, so that's one way, right? So, I mean, which is the most important way, I would say, to check if you have the relevant licensing licenses in place. Now, the second option, which you should be checking, is to create a org-wide email address. This is, if you wanted to send an email from a Salesforce, they can specify an email their own or the org-wide email address. So that's something I will let you guys to decide based on your business need, right? So you go here, you can go to org-wide addresses, and you can specify here by going and clicking on the add button. Yeah. Okay. So that's a second step. Enable person account, right? So it might be possible your org is not dealing with person account at this stage, but you might have a requirement for person account. So if you want to enable it, so you can go and um, so remember, once you enable, you can't disable it, right? So that's one of the thing you need to keep in mind, and you need to have a governance process in place before you go and activate a functionality within the Salesforce, right? And have a proper documentation. excuse me, have a proper documentation in place to ensure that you know what you're doing, and if a future admin or future consultant or an architect going to look at it, they will know the reason why this has been activated. Yeah. So you go to person account here. And so in my case, it's enabled. Like I said, it's a fully functional org, which I've registered for as a 30 days trial. So you go and activate it. So you'll get the steps to do that. Um, that's the uh, third step. Now, another step is you might wants to enable contacts to multiple accounts, right? So you might, so if you're a business, yeah, and you might be, say for instance, if you're a person who's running one business, right? Let's say you're running a hair salon. Tomorrow you might decide to run, let's say, a restaurant, right? You might need a permit for that, maybe a liquor permit or whatever, right? And you might, day after tomorrow, I'm just making this up, you might decide to run, let's say, a earwax remover clinic. Yep, because in my city where I live, we have a lot of earwax removal clinic. I can see at least. I mean, I live in a small town in New Zealand, right? Not in a small town in the sense we have 90,000 people. But we do have few earwax removal clinic, which is useful, right? I mean, so let's say if you wanted to set up that business, you might need specific licenses and for the nurses and doctors who are right. So so you might be a same person, but you might be associated with different accounts. So you can do that using this contact to multiple accounts. So for that, you need to activate this functionality. And to do that, you go to the setup, the same place, and you go to account. Um, Taking its own time. It's Sunday, right? So I think the org is lazy. I'm just kidding. Um, so you go to account settings here, and so you activate this option, right? Allow users to relate a contact to multiple accounts. You put a tick and save it. That's all you have to worry. Sounds good, right? Sounds very simple at the same time. And then you need to worry about Omni Studio. Omni Studio plays a very important role in PSS ecosystem. So if you're planning to install using a managed package, then there are separate steps you can use to do that. Now, if I go to installed package, let's see. So you got a lot of options here. So you got Omni Studio here in my case, right? And so to check if you have a relevant package installed, you go to install package and you can see it here, right? So that's a pretty simple admin stuff you can do. Um, so I think these are the pretty basic prerequisite step you need to uh, verify before you start using PSS functionality. So that's the first thing, right? And we need to worry about the next step now. That's the setting up the user and security. Obviously, if your security is a very important aspect when it comes to Salesforce, right? You should be very careful which profile you should be using, which permissions that you're using. The way we use, right? I mean, see, I work for a government agencies here. I've worked for a few in the past, right now I'm working for one, right? Because this is how it works. When you work for one, you do a great job there, you get referred to another one, then from there, the people knows me in New Zealand ecosystem, right? Because I've been heavily involved in a cancer screening projects and was heavily involved in a COVID project. So I built my reputation from these two work in New Zealand. So people know me, and plus I published a Salesforce book as well, and plus I'm doing a YouTube channel, and plus I also do podcasts and give a talk in different places. Okay, sorry, that's enough of rant, and sorry, I didn't mean to self promote, but I just okay, never mind. My apologies. Um, Now, users and security is very important. Obviously, you need to create a right user who will be using certain functionality, right? And to restrict that user from using certain functionality, you need to take uh, use of profile, permission sets, and even roles, right? Roles will defines your data access. Um, so what a trailhead suggested, right? You go and create a compliance officer, so and you clone your standard user profile. So usually it's a very bad practice to use a standard profile assigned to your user. It's better to clone it and then build a use case on top of it, right? That's always a good approach. And then, or other approach you can do is that have a base profile with a very limited access, then you can use permission sets to build on top of it. That's something you can do, and then you can group them together using permission set group. So there are a lot of things you can do, right? That's something I think if you are an admin, even it's a great opportunity for admin to build that security pattern. I would say, which right pattern to use, whether you have to use a profile with a very minimum access and then use permission set to build on it. Some companies use profiles and then use, limited permission set. That's just up to you, whichever you wanted to use and whichever principle you guys follow in your org. Yeah. Okay. So what I'll do, I'll go to profile, and I've already created a community uh, compliance officer, sorry, which I cloned it from a standard one, right? It's a very simple, you know, profile. Like I said, I cloned it from a standard one, and it's very easy to clone. So you can go to a profile and you can clone from here. I'm pretty sure you guys know how to create a profile, right? And then what I've done to create a role, right? So that's another thing you should be doing, because, like I said, your data access, the data visibility, and who will have access to what is usually driven by roles. So what do? You go to role here, and you go to setup roles. And what I've done, I've created a compliance officer role here, and then I've created a user. So I created a user. So obviously you guys know how to create a user, right? Go to user here and create a new user and then fill in information. So what I've done, I've created the user, Dave Cohen, um, just a compliance officer profile and Salesforce, right? So yeah, that's, and then I've assigned the respective, you can go and assign the respective, permission set kind of stuff. So that's from a that's very simple. That's the very simple setting from a user creation and security aspect. Now, once that's done, right? So we are okay with the prerequisite which you need to be aware before you recommend someone to start using um, PSS, right? So now we have to worry about the few important things. So I'll talk about one today, and then I'll talk about the rest in the upcoming episode. So that is to set up the regulatory authorities and authorization types. So obviously, the regulatory authority is an important thing. Like, for instance, every country has an agency or an authority. I will refer to as an agency who is responsible for looking after a certain group. Like, for instance, for a medicine, you have a board of medicine, and for you have transport, you have department of uh, transportation, and for defense, you have Ministry of Defense, right? So, and an authority or for health, you can say Ministry of Health, right? An authority who is responsible for, you know, licenses and, to your physicians or healthcare providers, and also, responsible for canceling the licenses to ensure, um, they are complying to the standard. So we will call it as a board of medicine, right? The same goes with the board of barber and cosmetology, right? So they're responsible for issuing the licensing and other stuff, right? And obviously, and tattooing and whatever, right? I don't know much about tattooing because I'm not into it, but the people who are into it, who have a saloon, they know, right? They need respect, they need certain license and kind of stuff, right? So, um, and then we have inspections, so Department of Buildings inspections. Uh, they are responsible for all kind of permits, right, to do with the building and kind of stuff. Now, what we do, right? So obviously, these are the agencies, like I said, right? I often refer to them as agencies. You can refer to them as a board or department, whichever terminology is applicable in your jurisdiction or in your nation, right? So, or some people, like I said, can ministry or whatever as well. So, uh, you need to set this up in your Salesforce org, because obviously, like I said, if someone requests a license, right? So you need to have that data model in place which handles all these things, right? So that's why we have something called regulatory authorities. So now you need to set this up. So we have a data model in place. So if I go to Object Manager and if I go to regulatory authorities, oh, come on. I think I didn't copy it correctly. And okay, something like that. So regulatory. So you have. So this is the one, regulatory authority, and you can see that if you look at the fields, you have not much field, right? The name and description, that's pretty much it. So if I go here, because it's just a way to tell the system, look, this is a regulatory authority, and and these are the list. That's pretty much it. So if I go here, and if I've already created this to save time. So you have Board of Medicine. You can, if you want, you can go and create here. Like I said, you got two fields to fill. That's pretty much it. In this case, um, that's pretty weird. Where does that go? Yeah, the Board of Medicine, right? So this is the two things. You have a name, you have a description. So the description says licensed physicians and other healthcare provider to practice in the state, right? So these are this sits at the top of the hierarchy. Yeah. Now, once that's done, what you need to do, you need to go and create authorization type, which is means um, the kind of things these people issue, right? So, for instance, the Board of Medicine, right? They issue physician license, and there's a type is type of professional occupation license. And what's the category? You have license. Or if you're someone who wants to get a building permit, so you use the same object to enter the information, and say, for instance, a sign permit or so that's obviously a building permit, right? You might have seen the road sign and or the building sign, whatever, right? So you can get the sign permit, and so the authority who are issuing them are Department of Building Inspection, right? So you can do that option using PSS. So what do you need to do? Um, I hope it's clear, right? It's not confusing, because I know that there are a lot of moving parts here, but I'm just trying to make it, clear for you so that you guys understand that the use case for it, right? So we're talking about the medicine, right? So Board of Medicine responsible for issuing certain kind of license, like surgery license or nursing license or whatever, right? I'm not much into medicine field, but I'm just saying based on doctors and nurses and what have you, they need certain kind of permits, right, or license to practice. Um, so, like for instance, in this regulatory authorization type, I've created something called surgical technologies and surgical assistant license, and this is a professional occupation license. Now, and the type is called license type. And what I'll do, and jurisdiction is state, and issuing department is Board of Medicine. So let's create one, right? And surgical technologist and surgical assistant license. What I'll do, I will create something called a nurse uh, license, and I will, come on, and I will link it to, I'll just leave it blank, and it's a license. Jurisdiction, like I said, it's a state, and issuing department, it's the Board of Medicine. Process duration, let's say, I don't know how long it takes to process. Let's say uh, 4 weeks or something. Yeah, duration type. I just put month. So we have this regulatory authorization type, and so I fill this information. Now you will see where it is needed in the later stage. Just for now, like I said, you have a department who issues a license, and then you have a types. So these are the types of things they issue, right? I hope that's clear. Okay, so once that's done, right, now we have set up the two codes, which is important one. Now we need to worry about the create a business type, right? Obviously, what kind of business you are requesting it. Are you requesting from a retail or a healthcare facility, right? So, like for instance, um, you might be a GP clinic, right? That's a business. So it's a healthcare provider facility. Now, healthcare provider facility might need a surgeon. I know in New Zealand, usually you don't do surgery in a GP clinic, very rare for tiny things, but like, some other countries I've seen, right? Like, for instance, depends, right? I don't want to name any country, right? So, but a few countries I've seen where a GP clinic does kind of some kind of surgery as well. Like if you have, let's say, a fracture, or if you have, uh, an injury, they will stitch that up. And if you have a kind of a mole remover, tiny bit stuff. So you might need a certain kind of surgeon for that. So the business, let's say your business, you wanted to request for this kind of license, right? So that's where you go and come to, um, uh, that's where the business type is important. So what I'll do, um, uh, what I'll do, my spelling sucks. I can't even spell tiny stuff, which is interesting, right? Okay, so there's one type I've already created. Let's call it medical facility. So it's like a medical facility. I don't really have to name a specific business, right? A business type, what kind of business we're going to request it? Like I said, GP clinic, you can put a generic term, or a medical facility in my case, right? And what industry is it? It's a healthcare. And what type is it? Is a business, right? So that's there. And then you have business regulationary type, right? So which is so you need to associate your type request with the business application. Obviously, you know, um, when you are requesting for a permit, right? You are requesting the permit. Either you can request individually, which is another thing. Let's say we are talking about the business, right? We're talking about the healthcare provider. So a healthcare provider might request on your behalf. So your business is requesting, um, a license, right? So, or let's say, for instance, Uh, like I said here in this example, a constituent apply for a business license to run a saloon. They need to request a spa permit. Or if they wanted to run a GP clinic, they need to request certain permit, right? Technology license, nurse license, or whatever. They all need to have it in place, right? So they use this option, regulatory authority type. So what I'll do here, let me copy this one. The place where I work, we don't do much with respect to the healthcare stuff, PSS. We do a little bit different, right? So that's why I'm a little bit, as you can see, my explanation is a little bit. If it's confusing, my apologies, right? If you are a doctor or a practitioner, right, you might say, that is okay. We don't have this kind of license. So I just said, like, I made this up, right? It's a fictitious scenario, I said. Nurses might have different permits. I don't know what permits they need. Um, yes, I've worked on a cancer screening project, but what I've done, I built built a solution on top of a Salesforce ecosystem, and I've been given the requirement, all the necessary rules for, let's say, for the cancer screening, how this should happen, and the clinician actually gave us the rules, and based on the rules we built, right? Like they were our business analysts, if that makes sense. Okay, so here what we have regulatory authorization type. So what I'll do, I'll go here and I will say business type, medical facility, and I will say nurse license, right? Business authorization type, what kind of business you are and what kind of authorization type you're looking for. It's just the nurse license, right? That's cool. Now we need to make a dependency. So, um, I mean, to be honest, one thing I would just say that I think Salesforce kind of did too much of normalization when it comes to the data model, right? It's not really needed, like too many objects, and that's one of my concern I have with the some of the PSS data model. They've segregated too much stuff out there, right? It can get confusing, right? Some of the stuff they could have combined in the same object, but yeah, like for instance, the net zero data model, that's just a bloody mess, right? I mean, it's not a good data model at all, and yeah. Anyways, so now we are looking at business regulatory authorization type dependency. Uh, so you have the business type created, authorization type created. Now you're linking it together, the list of uh, permission as well as the permits that's needed for the business. For instance, right? I'll show you, right? That makes it clear. Otherwise, you'll say this guy's talking jargon. So I have my business is like what, Board of Medicine, yeah. So this is the license I've requested, but this one surgical also depends on the nurse license, right? Because obviously, you know, this business, yeah, medical care. So this medical care, right? Obviously, my GP clinic has requested for certain permits so that we can start the business, right? We can start functioning. So this is a parent authorization type, what we requested, like we need a surgical, but at the same time, the nurse um, one is dependent on it as well. So yeah. So as you can see here, like I said, that this guy created a permit dependency record to show the list of permits required for business type and how they depend on each other, right? So constituents can use the portal to view we can look at the portal later, not today. Um, so that's how some of the few things we can do using PSS. Now, I acknowledge that it can get a bit confusing, right? A lot of codes we need to do. Just think about it from a very simplistic perspective. You are a business, right? You wanted to run your business like a saloon or a restaurant, but to run that, you need to have a certain kind of permits, a liquor license or a haircut license, of if there's anything called like that, or spa permit, right? So these kind of information needs to be maintained in the system, right? So that you as a business apply for a license permit, so that your license permits go and associate with the right data model, right? In this case, obviously you need to know who is going to authorize it and what kind of license you're requesting and what kind of business you are and what kind of licenses that is dependent, to make sure that you have so that you get all the stuff covered in your license, right? So that's the kind of narrative behind all these objects that we have in place, right? I hope that explained in a simple way, right? um, so I'm not gonna showcase any more stuff today because I think it's enough for you guys today to go and practice. That's one thing I would highly encourage, along with watching my video, which is great. Thank you very much for doing that. I would highly encourage you to go and do hands-on. It's very important. Like I've always been telling you for the past, how many years since you guys known me. So please do hands-on. It's very important. It's the muscle memory that you create that will help you, you know, do things. So that being said, I hope you guys have an amazing Sunday. Adios.